Wow. Is everybody here? Everybody's here.
Mayor Breeden.
Here.
Ms. Stevens.
Here.
Mr. Blaze.
Present.
Mr. Heyman.
Here.
Mr. Maurer.
Here.
5 present. We have a quorum.
Okay. Jessica, would you lead us in the pledge?
We need to approve the agenda first.
Oh, yes, ma'am.
Ms. Breeden, we have to approve the agenda first.
While we're up, let's go ahead and do that, and then we'll approve the agenda, please. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, bow your head with me, please. Lord, we thank you for this day. We thank you for our community. We thank you most of all for our president who is here to talk to us and share with us his feelings about what's happening in our county. I thank you for all the people that are here and continue to bless us and be there with us. In your precious name we pray. Amen. Amen. Okay, now we will approve the agenda.
I motion approval.
I have something to say on that.
Okay.
Well, we have a motion. Do we have a second? Yeah. Okay. Can we have a comment on that, Keith, on the approval of the agenda?
Sure.
Did you get a second?
Okay, please.
Did someone second it?
Yes, we did.
Who did?
Sir.
Well, 2 things is the meeting needs to be canceled under California law because it was late and it violates the Brown Act. But the most important one as far as the agenda, item number 2 on the agenda says approve a resolution by City Council. In the package, there's an ordinance attached to that. It's improperly agendized, so it has to be removed to improperly agendized. Because it should say an ordinance is part of this discussion, and it doesn't.
The ordinance is not part of discussion.
Thank you.
It says approval shows a new ordinance there, and says we want to make things to an ordinance. So maybe I just see that wrong, but
The ordinance says that the fees are set by resolution, so we're approving a resolution to set the fees.
And
an ordinance under California law still has to be.
Would you like me to address those 2
please,
comments?
would you too, sir?
Sure. I would direct the member of the public to Government Code Section 54955 that allows for when there's not a full quorum present, a meeting can be adjourned to a later time. That is the one instance where a meeting can commence solely for the purpose of adjourning the meeting to a later time. And the law says that can be done by a single member of the legislative body or even the board secretary. So Rika could have done it too. So when you guys weren't here, the mayor informed everybody that we were adjourning to 6:45.
45, which
So,
is when we began.
Yeah. On the second point, I'm not sure I understand the comment exactly, but I would point out generally that the Brown Act requires that the general subject matter of the item be specified sufficiently so people know in general what is being considered or talked about, and it seems to me that item meets that standard. And then one last thing, and that is I before the meeting started, I got a little short with a couple members of the public when they raised these issues with me, and was dismissive, and I just want to apologize for that.
Thank you, sir. Okay, all right, then we will come back then to, do you want, is that your city's attorney's report, or do you,
He was responding
to the agenda, but I want to know if we're going to go to that.
I'll submit that as my report as well.
Okay, all right, so the approval of the agenda was made and seconded, and a motion, please.
Please vote. 5 ayes, motion carries.
Okay. Public comment on items not in the agenda. Persons wishing to address the council on matters that are within the council's jurisdiction and do not already appear in the agenda may do so at this time. Pursuant to the Brown Act, the City Council may not take action on any item that does not appear in the agenda. Speakers are limited to a total of 5 minutes. The public comment section of the agenda is limited to a total of 1 hour. Each speaker is asked to provide his or her name. I also would like to ask that if you would provide your name and address, please. Some of you are stating addresses on file, and if we need to get back to you, we'd like to make sure we have an update on those. So if you would do so, we would appreciate it. Is there any public comment?
Well, first, I want to address the Brown Act again. And first, we're a republic, not a democracy. Anyone that calls us a democracy hates our Constitution and our country. The reason we're a republic is because we operate through a representative form of government. And when this council continues to violate the Brown Act and properly inform, and I don't agree with the attorney's statement, people like myself, I'm stretching it right now to stay here this long to try and participate in my government. The meeting should have been canceled and re-agendized and called. That particular section he's referring to in there has to do with a meeting that's in order and generally goes over, and they'll move it to the next day or something where people have another idea. Today doesn't fall into that particular category. The Brown Act was written so that the people are ensured that they can participate in their government. The Brown Act is also, failure to comply with it is also a criminal violation. And as such, anytime it's violated, you're in violation of a criminal act. When the council gets together and sits and meets and goes on with it after they've been notified, it becomes a felony. It's conspiracy to commit a crime. And that includes the attorney, which would be aiding and abetting, and the city manager, and possibly even the clerk. If the people can't be fully informed, how can we participate in our government? That's the whole purpose of the Brown Act. And instead of listening to the people, says, okay, we can go this extra mile, we can do this. No, we just simply get dismissed every time. And it's about time we start following the Brown Act and its intent. The problem with the attorney's interpretation most of the time is that he reads it to be in favor of the council. It's not written to be in favor of the council. In fact, the council has a burden to prove they complied with it. It's one of the few laws that they hold the burden. And I don't know why anyone representing the people would have a problem with fully informing them. That makes absolutely no sense to me unless you want to be a tyrant, and I don't want to call you that. But that's where we're standing right now. We need to look at that Brown and say, how do we comply with this and how do we meet its intent? We don't even try. When the lawyer stands up there and then makes a comment about something, he could be disbarred for several comments I've heard him make in this institution. Because he can't simply make a comment. He has an obligation under the California Practices Act to do his due diligence before he gives an answer. If he doesn't do that due diligence, he could be disbarred. And he owes the due diligence not only to you, but to the people. While he may represent the council and the city, I hate to tell people this, but I happen to be part of the city. And without that full thought, we are running down a road that we should never want to go down. In fact, we should object to it strenuously. Why are we a republic? The reason we're not a democracy. We're not a democracy because we don't believe in mob rules. Our republic was set up for one primary reason and one primary reason only. Our primary obligation, anyone that takes an oath of office, is to protect the individual's rights. Because when I protect his rights, or his rights, we're all protected. If I put it in the group and say, that group doesn't have rights, none of us are protected. Sometimes it's difficult to understand and cooperate in a republic. But the loss is far more dangerous. And we need to pay attention to that danger. It's just like tonight. We delayed the meeting. Well, there's people that left that wanted to attend this meeting. And that shows a violation of the Brown Act right there. I almost had to leave. In fact, I do. I have to one more comment, hopefully later, on something very important. But without making the opportunity for the people, you're not doing it. Just like the continuum meeting. Sometimes meetings get carried over. You get to 10 o'clock and says, hey, we're tired. We can't do this. We're going to move it to tomorrow night. That's perfectly legitimate. Even that shouldn't be done as a general rule. But it can be done under the law. And she says, well, we're just going to move these agenda items to another night unless it's something really important, because it's most important that the people understand what their representatives are doing. I stand up here and talk very boldly, but I do it for a reason. We have something that's very, very precious, and it needs to be protected. And until we protect that, we have a serious problem. Right now, we're trying to destroy it across this country. They call it socialism. We don't want socialism in this country. We need to stand up for this country. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. My name is Mark McCoy. Address is 812 East California Avenue. I own a small business called Mark McCoy Live Sound Reinforcement. I have a business license through the City of Ridgecrest, which I renew annually, and I am a homeowner in the City of Ridgecrest, so I pay my property taxes. And I team up with another company, Stage Monkey Productions. Together we brand ourselves as MC Squared, and we provide sound, lights, and pipe and drape to our community. We do events at various venues in the city, including the Kerr-McGee Center. And we do 2 large events at the Kerr-McGee Center every year, the California Contracting, Acquisition, and Procurement Expo, and the Economic Outlook Conference, which is coming up next week. But we do a lot of smaller events, and sometimes it's just lights and pipe and drape. We're not doing sound. One request from our clients when we do an event at the Kerr-McGee Center is for better video services. So we do collaborate with the city. In that aspect, we provide all the video sourcing, a 4-channel video switcher. For CCAP, that particular client chooses to have us rent video displays out of Bakersfield. But for the Economic Outlook Conference, they do use the city's projectors and video screens. If you're not familiar with that setup, the city has square video screens, or screens that are in the 4:3 aspect ratio, using high-definition projectors which project in a rectangle or 16:9 aspect ratio. For $15,000, the city could buy a couple of 100-inch video displays, or they could update their video projectors, or update the video screens to be rectangles, right, that 16:9 format instead of 4:3, so that the video screens actually fit the city's projectors. But I would love to see those projectors upgraded to short-throw projectors. So what I'm wondering is why the city chose to spend $15,000 on pipe and drape. This is a service that we provide. It doesn't cost the city a dime. We actually charge our clients to provide pipe and drape. We have over 300 linear feet of 14-foot high pipe and drape. For our clients, they typically, at that point, when they're requesting pipe and drape, have already requested sound and light. So we're offering them a package, which means they're getting pipe and drape at an extremely competitive and reduced cost, a very low rate. So I'm just concerned with why the city chose to do this. Had the council done, some research, maybe talked with Jason Patton or Caesar, one of the city employees. There are a lot of people in this community, probably even the mayor is aware of what we provide. Had somebody done any sort of research, you would have found that there was a small business in town that was providing that service. Now, for CCAP, the 30 vendor booths that are set up with pipe and drape in the gym, that's owned by the RACVB. That's 8-foot-high pipe and drape, and you know the difference between that and what we offer because ours is 14-foot high, which is the exact height of the ceiling in the Kerr-McGee Center. So we can pipe and drape all the way around the Kerr-McGee Center in the banquet hall, 14 feet high. We're geared up to do that. The only time we use the RACVB, they hire us to set up their pipe and drape in the gym for the CCAP Expo. So I just wanted to voice my concern with the city that that this purchase has happened. I wonder what why the city would do this to a small business that is going to face potential loss in revenue. What part of the budget this purchase came out of, how long does the city think it's going to take to get a return on that investment, and how it benefits the community to have the city competing with my small business to provide this service. Thank you.
We appreciate your comments, and we will get back to you because we can't respond on public comment.
Okay, thank you,
But we will get back to you, I promise.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other public comment? All right, the next item is the consent calendar. All items on the consent calendar are considered to be routine by city staff and will be approved in one motion if no member of the council or the public wishes to comment or ask questions. If comment or discussion is desired by anyone, thank you. That item may be removed from the consent calendar and will be considered separately with public comment before action is taken. I'm going to read the item. Proposed action: approve the draft minutes of the City of Ridgecrest City Council Successor Redevelopment Agency Financing Authority, Housing Authority regular meeting dated February 5th, 2020. Does anybody wish that item to be pulled? Does anybody from the public wish that item to be pulled? Okay, a motion?
So move.
Second.
Please vote. Five ayes, motion carries.
Okay.
Madam Mayor, before you go to the next item, I do believe you missed council announcements.
I did. Sorry, I didn't see the line there. My apologies. Does anyone have council announcements? I have a couple. I don't want to jump on anybody if they're doing it. I would like to remind you all on Friday, March 27th, is the Respect for Law Recognition Dinner here at the Kerr-McGee Center. We are honoring and recognizing all the first responders and people who help us all out through the community, whether they be sheriffs, police department, CHP, both China Lake and local. And it's a no-host bar, $25, and it's going to be here, and I encourage all of you to attend. There's information here if you'd like to. I also wanted to remind you that next Thursday is the Economic Outlook Conference. It's going to be here starting at 7 o'clock. There is a number of local economic entities, Alta One, the base, the city, the county. Wait a minute, I've got the agenda, sorry. The IWV EDC, school district, the city of Lancaster, Buxton. We're having the whole hour for our special speaker is at 10:15. He is going to speak on he's on the California Economic Forecast. Carol Vaughn from the Board of Realtors, Joan Johnson from the base, and Michelle Lemke, who's going to be the chair-elect for the Chamber of Commerce. That'll be next Thursday. The night before that, there is a speakers event, and if you would like to go to that, you must let the chamber know ahead of time so they can prepare enough food for everybody. So if you're going to the Economic Outlook Conference and or the event beforehand, please let somebody know. Those are all of my announcements, I believe. Anybody else? Okay, thank you. All right, now we will go to discussion and action items. Approve a resolution of the City Council of the City of Ridgecrest establishing cost recovery fees for special event permits and cleanup. Rika, you have this?
Yes, ma'am. This is to bring our fees up to a little bit more current. We haven't updated these fees since 1997. General practice has been that when you have a nonprofit, if the nonprofit presents a letter asking for the fee to be waived, we will do that. The costs with administration are not being covered, waiving the fees as such. So we're proposing that we put a for-profit and a nonprofit fee in there to help recover the administrative costs of processing the application.
Would you identify those fees for the public?
Yes, ma'am. It's $215 for a for-profit and $100 for nonprofit, and also a $50 refundable fee for the use of cones and the like from our streets department if the police department says that they are to be needed. We've had some incidences where the organizations are supposed to pick them up and take them back, and they haven't been taken back. So that's why we're going to want to instill the $50 refundable fee. Okay. If they bring them back, no problem.
Okay. Are there questions from council on this item? I
was just asking for specification on where exactly we were talking about the event being held, and so he explained that it's outside.
Oh, yes, ma'am.
Of the, because I was like, are we talking about?
No, it's like for Kiwanis Walkathons, Petroglyph Festival, Viewfinders events like that outside and within the city limits.
And
not within the Kerr-McGee Center.
The parades that don't.
Christmas parade, stuff like that.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I see public comment. Mr. Porter?
Thank you. Well, I have a problem with the ordinance in itself. We pay taxes, and every time I keep coming to this council, and they keep saying, we need to raise this fee, we need to raise this fee. Well, are we a contractor now that just every time we want the city to do its job, we have to pay for it? And she admitted that they changed the ordinance that makes a requirement that it has to be properly notified because they added nonprofits to it.
I'm not changing the ordinance, sir.
Well, your statement said nonprofits didn't used to be included in it.
Resolution.
I understand. I disagree with you. The problem with this whole thing is written in a very vague format. In fact, it's almost unenforceable, if it even is. It says, if a crowd of more than 40 people are walking down the sidewalk, you need a permit. Well, that's violation of the United States Constitution and California Constitution as far as assembly. It says if you interfere with normal flow of traffic. Well, if only one person walks across that street in any given day, if 5 people in your group or 45 people walk across, then they're changing that flow of traffic, even if they don't block traffic. Even if they use a controlled intersection, they push the button there. And people say, well, that's going to be used with common sense. Unfortunately, you can never trust the government to do that. People with power will always abuse power, and you have to take that attitude if you want to keep a free nation. I said, I don't know why we need to increase it at all. It seems to be working. It's not like we have that many permits anyway. There's no justification right up. Says, well, it hasn't kept up with the times. Well, I don't know what it costs. But we really need to have discussions. Do we want this? Do we need it? And what do we get for our tax dollars? And I can get into the building permits. The cities only have authority under California law to do things for public safety. I can also make a partial argument for this for public safety. We have a building permit that says, oh, well, we need you to have smoke alarms, or we need to have
Sir,
this.
we're not discussing building permits right now.
I understand. And I wasn't discussing. I was making an example. But my time's up, apparently. Maybe not. I don't know. It's just the point that I'm making has nothing to do with building permits per se. Is the city council is put in a position to write laws for public safety, not for general control. And if you can't show it's a public safety thing, then we shouldn't be dealing with it. And each one of these have to show why we have a public safety problem with it, whether we like it or not. It's not about what the government controls, it's what it needs to control. And even that's under high scrutiny if we're going to be a free nation. And we have to start saying our government is not our mommy and daddy. Our government is here to work for us and promote our liberty and freedom to every degree possible. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Miller?
Hi there, Scott Miller, 341 East Wilson, Ridgecrest, California. Rick, I think you just covered this. You said it'd be like Petroglyph Festival and those type of things. Would this also, and you said viewfinders, would it affect things like the fair? No. So just, well, I have to use the word community events. Being a vendor, this directly hits my pocketbook, as vendor fees will start going up when the city starts raising prices. Vendor fees are already crazy to individuals. So it wouldn't affect the fair, but it would affect things like Petroglyph Festival. If they want to do an event, and it's the elusive they, if they want to do an event over on Balsam Street, that would probably fall under this?
They already file a special event permit and they pay the fees because they're a for-profit event.
Okay. And I don't know the answer now. What is the fee now currently?
$2.15 for a profit, and we're establishing $100 for nonprofit.
Actually, it should be $2.15 for everybody. And we're just now formalizing the fact is if you're nonprofit, you're going to pay $100, whereas before it was my discretion whether or not to charge you the full fee or to waive it. So what this does now is this allows us to formalize, instead of just staff just going out and saying everybody's paying the $2.15 now, we're now going to give a break to the nonprofits of $100 instead of them paying the $2.15 like they should have. However, the city has had a practice of allowing them to do it for free. So the for-profits, there's no increase. The nonprofits will now be paying $100 because we're having a lot of requests, and these are more for like shutting down the roadway.
I totally understand now. I misunderstood what was happening, and I apologize. So it's not...
No, I was just trying to explain. I was also trying to answer Mr. Porter's question at the same time.
So the fees are not going up. They're I'm going to say normalizing $2.15 and $100, and it's just standardizing versus anything else.
Basically, we're formalizing the fact that the nonprofits need to pay $100 instead of $2.15.
Thank you for the clarification. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment? Is the council comment?
Can I ask Ron a question?
Sure, of course.
Ron, have we seen an increased need or like a loss to the city because that charge hasn't been being collected?
We've been processing more and more nonprofit applications, and it is taking a significant amount of staff time to process these. In fact, the $2.15 amount is probably not coming anywhere near close to recouping what the cost is to process them. They are still very reasonable, but it is something.
Understood. Thank you.
Any other council comments? Okay, is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second?
Second.
Please vote. Five ayes, motion carries.
Okay, the next item. This is you, Councilman Hayman, discussion and provide guidance to the city's representative to the board of the Indian Wells Valley Groundwater Authority.
So I don't have any new data to provide. We will be meeting tomorrow So at our next council meeting, I will give an update on the any new items that are covered at tomorrow's meeting.
Okay,
That's it.
thank you, sir.
So there's no discussion coming up. When's the discussion coming up for fees and things? Do we have an idea of when that's going to be?
As far as what's on tomorrow's agenda, or are you just asking in general when the fees would be coming up?
Yeah.
I don't know if that's how. I'd maybe pass that down to.
So the goal would be to have the fees in place and enforceable by July. So as I recall, our plan is to have that hearing, I think authorize the notice to go out in March with a hearing, I suppose it would be April.
Yeah.
So-
So it's currently under discussion, fees and direction that we're going to be going, but we're
Yeah.
looking at April and by July to have anything in.
Right, so
And
the way the process works is we're using a 218 process. So we would be sending out notice of the fees, whatever the fees are that get decided on, to all of the affected properties, which is pretty much everybody, in March. So that will go in at March. Then we'll have a hearing where, it's a 218 majority protest hearing at that point. And then after that, provided there's not a majority protest, they would be free to adopt the fees after that.
So I guess my question is, are we going to have a discussion about what the fees being discussed here before the GSA sends out that
Well, I think it would
ballot
be.
in March?
Oh, we don't know what they're going to send out in March until, the difficulty there is that's going to be decided by the board in March. But what we could do is, and might be appropriate to do, is once that notice goes out, I guess, Scott, we could receive comments from the city council on it.
I think it would be, obviously, I would think that there's some kind of ballpark numbers being talked about. And we should, because normally it's to give direction to our
Right.
representatives, so we need to make sure we're okay with what they're moving forward with.
I gave a presentation in the public portion of the meeting in, I want to say November, where I talked about categories of fees, and we can talk about that anytime. I don't know, though, honestly, what the final numbers are going to be for those, because, for example, so there's 3 categories of fees we've talked about. We've talked about what I keep calling a replenishment fee, but it's the technical name is, I forget what Phil calls it. Augmentation fee is what Phil likes to call it. Which is the cost of, to reimburse for at least some of the cost of providing replacement water that's pumped out beyond the native yield. The second fee is a well impact mitigation fee, because we know that even if we carry out the GSP as intended, well levels will continue to go down, and that will impact some wells, so there needs to be some money for that. And then the final part is the administrative fee. Regarding those numbers, what those fees should be. Currently, the staff is working out sort of the basis for the fees. That's involving information from the water resources manager, from the acting. For example, we need to nail down the projected costs of the water replenishment, and then what portion of that the staff's going to recommend the fee pay for, because it's not going to be all of the replenishment water costs, because those would be crazy high. And so we're trying to get into the point where we get the process started, and then that could qualify us for grants and so on and so forth. But again, I don't know what that number is. The issue with setting a number for the administrative fee is we have had trouble developing an administrative cost budget, because part of that is dependent on getting an agreement from the board about exactly what they want to pay for in terms of an administration, and that is currently the subject of debate among the board too. So there's a lot of discussions sort of bundled into that, and that's going to end up having to happen at the board meeting, not tomorrow, but in March.
So I guess, tomorrow you're not talking about the fees then?
Oh, actually, maybe I'm wrong about that. Scott's giving me a look. Do we have that? I forget. Is that on the agenda for tomorrow, that discussion? I thought well registration is what we had on.
Yeah,
the agenda.
I don't recall it being on the agenda, the actual fee discussion. So
Yeah.
it was on a previous agenda item. We had some discussion about
Right.
fees, but we've never agreed to, an amount and shelved it for a later time frame.
Yeah, currently where it sits from the board is the board has sent the matter to staff, and then staff's got to come back with a recommendation. And that we're supposed to bring that back in March.
And so you're planning on no one knowing what the recommendation is until that meeting, and at that same meeting, passing it and sending out the ballot before the agencies have time to talk about it? Like, because it seems to me, because we have representatives
yeah.
on there, but
The
the
agenda for
boards,
that-
like the water board, should talk about it before their member votes on it. Like, we should talk about it before our member votes on it.
The agenda for that meeting should be posted with the staff report and the recommendation on the Friday prior to the meeting, which happens to be before our city council meeting.
Okay.
So it should be in the agenda, and if there's something to talk about, we can talk about it. This
Okay.
is a reoccurring item on the agenda, so.
Okay, I just want to make sure that we have that.
I don't know, the water district's in a different situation because their meetings are on Mondays, right? So they would have had a
Sometimes
meeting.
it's posted,
Yes.
sometimes-
Yeah, so they're in the same boat. There'll be plenty of public discussion of this, I'm sure.
I think Lindsay's point on this is we put this item on the agenda, so if he's going to vote on something tomorrow, we want to know what it is and make sure he knows our feelings about
Right.
how to vote.
Right. That's how I'm interpreting.
And so I would think that our meeting before March's meeting, we would be looking at those fees to see if that's
Right,
what-
because I
that's
don't
what
think we taled about, like, the plan was approved, right? But I
Right.
don't know that
we haven't talked about.
we
fees.
didn't say that we were good with the plan being approved. And so I just think it's kind of important that we make sure that we're having the discussions here.
So basically, you're kind of asking if there's going to be any time frame from the point that fee's discussed and agreed upon before it's actually adopted, or gone
Or
to a
mailed out
vote.
and voted on, like, I think
Do we have time?
we need to make sure
Do
we
we have
have
time to bring it to the council
Yes.
now in
Yes.
an open discussion,
Right.
right? Because at that point, it's something that's already been made.
Exactly.
But as the attorney is stating that if it's not something that's been made on
Okay.
a public,
I just wanted to verify that basically, if there's like
Yep.
important things like that being talked about, that we make sure we talk about them first, so.
Yeah, that, like I said, the agenda, just like the agenda for this meeting, I think came out on Friday, or maybe even before that. The agenda on that meeting should come out the Friday before.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it will be there, and the staff report will be, I'm sure, voluminous.
but the main topics on tomorrow's
So,
agenda is capital core, well metering, and then some basic water resource manager reports, general manager's reports, and closing comments. So, one other big one is consideration and action opposing the Hayway geothermal leasing. So that one's probably going to be taking, a lot of time and thought tomorrow.
And the metering, can you explain that a little bit? Is that mandating that everyone meter, or?
I think those are some of the issues that will be discussed tomorrow. So I think after tomorrow's meeting that we have as a board, I can report back to you on
Okay.
what is the metering going to end up,
Okay.
being in.
Because all that got sent out was, it just says first reading of the ordinance of the.
I know
It
some of the
doesn't have
basic-
the full package. That's
Right,
what I
if
was
you
trying
read
to-
into it, the minimus users aren't being,
That's
it has to
Okay.
do with the bigger water, pumping.
Okay. Because sometimes I get the full package, but I only got like the first 2 pages this time, so I didn't know.
And that will, I'm going to take, it's going to be gone over in, pretty good detail tomorrow. So
Okay.
I'll make a point to report back on the metering and what is gone over, but at this point, the fees do not look like they're going to be part of that agenda.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, any other comments? Oh, Mr. Porter?
Yes. I haven't spoken much on this groundwater authority, but there's two things that are very important to understand. And that is, this is the biggest scam ever pulled on small governments in the state of California by the state of California. Its sole purpose is not to protect our water. It's not to protect us. Its sole purpose is to get us to give away our rights to our water to them so that they can have absolute control. They said, well, if we don't do it, they'll do it. Well, fine. If you told them, go ahead, they'll do it, they won't. The most important part here is this groundwater authority has no legislative authority per the United States Constitution and per the California Constitution. It's not a legislative body. It has no authority to write law. And if you disagree with that, look up New York versus Clinton. It says the legislative branch cannot give away their legislative authority to any other body. They don't have the authority to write an ordinance or collect taxes. That's a legislative function. Again, we need to watch our government because this is totally out of line.
Sir, they're not collecting taxes.
Oh, they will be. A fee is a tax.
Well, it is not.
Well, you and I disagree, but it was passed in California that called fees taxes. So, and if it comes out of my pocket, it's a tax, and there's no one in this room that's going to disagree with me. But something more important here is that 99% of the water rights in this valley belong to the federal government. The only ones that don't are those under patented claims. The California has no authority, nor does the General Groundwater Authority have any authority to question that whatsoever. Because they belong to the federal government. Those rights were not given with the property. Federal government basically gave them permission to do whatever they want with groundwater until someone deals with it in that fashion. We're just spinning our wheels and wasting money. I've talked to people about this thing over the years, and they said, how do we get the water? How do we get the... No one wants to look at how do we get the water. All they look at is ways to spend lots of money. The simplest way to solve this problem is two things. The aqueduct and Trona. If we actually build a sewage waste plant, the amount of water that's pumped out of this valley that could be used over there for their processing, this tertiary water, they probably wouldn't care. Yeah, it's a pipeline for 25 miles, big deal. That's nothing compared to what they're going to spend otherwise. As far as water for agriculture, if we want to replace it, we can take it out of the aqueduct and have the state work for us and replace it in Lancaster out of the California aqueduct, which we all paid for too, by the way, for agriculture. Why shouldn't our agriculture be able to benefit from it? See, everybody wants to spend money because it's not their wallet. It is your wallet, and we better start paying attention. We better start including the public. We didn't have a board out there dictating to us that's not even elected by the people. They have no legislative authority. And if we don't stand up for that, you're going to be ashamed when your grandchildren look back at you and say, what did you do to us? Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Go ahead.
So today was pretty outstanding day. We got to sit and listen to the President of the United States talk about this very issue, and that is water. And so he's looking to bring some prominent changes to the water in California, and it's optimistic. We're over here.
Stop
so
it.
We're over here on the east.
You have no right. You have no right to speak. You have no right to speak. It's
So whether-
the councilman is speaking.
So
please.
whether the changes that affect the central part of the state will collaterally or affect us in a positive manner is, we'll have to wait and see. But it would sure be nice to see some changes that are positive for the state of California, that affect the state as a whole and affect us as a party sitting out here on the fringe. Because what benefits other parts of the state could slacken it for us and allow us to see some benefit from it too. So it's pure optimism at this point in time, but it is a step in the right direction. So
Thank you.
Yeah, I have to agree because it was really awesome hearing him speak about making sure that we protect the farmers and their rights and their land rights. And so I really appreciated hearing him speak on that and how much water, and hearing the one farmer speak about it being their lifeblood, and it truly is. So.
exactly, and if they can increase that water there, will it allow us to maybe benefit and be able to accommodate or access a little more water on this side? That would be a really great thing. Secondly, too, had an opportunity to speak. I was in St. George, Utah. They live in a desert that's very similar to our environment here. They're going to have to pipe water down from Lake Powell all the way to St. George at the tune of $2 billion. So if you think for a moment that we're in a unique position and it's going to cost money, it's very small amount of money in comparison to what some of these other communities, not only in California, but in Arizona and in Utah, are having to do for water. It's a big issue. It's not going to get easier. The quicker we get after it, the better off these communities are going to be. And the ones that are moving quick on it, I think, are going to be in a better position. So I think it's important that we continue in this direction to make sure that we can get ourselves water secure for now and for the future, for this space, for this community, for generations to come. So, but anyway, when I heard that what they were going to be paying, how far they got to pump the water, I thought, wow, ours is doable. We can make this happen. So anyway, enough talk.
Madam Mayor, can I throw in
Please.
a couple comments too? I just want to, I've heard it said a few times in public, and I think there's some confusion around the idea of what the GSP does, and I think it's helpful to sort of reiterate that the GSP is not designed to take away or change anybody's property rights. As a matter of fact, we're not allowed to do that. The law says that we can't, and we don't intend to. What the GSP does is it says that if you use more than a certain, you're free to pump as much as you want. There is no limitation on pumping. However, if you pump more than a certain amount and it impacts the basin, then there's a fee that will be charged to make sure we can bring in water to replace the water that you've pumped, and therefore preserve the basin going forward so there's enough water for everybody to use. That's the heart of it. And so just for clarity, we're not deciding somebody's got a water right and somebody else, somebody can pump and somebody can't. We're not at that point.
I thought that limits were set for particular users, and that, I mean, you're saying it's not affecting property rights, but if you charge someone fees so high that you take them out of business, that's affecting their. So, I mean, you're kind of splitting here.
Well, I look at it this way. Somebody's got title to their car, but they pay for a driver's license. And, we're not taking the car away because we're charging them the cost of providing a driver's license.
But originally when people purchased their property, they viewed it as they owned it all the way up and all the way down. And so now it's kind of being modified. And so that's why I think people view it as their property rights being affected. Because they are. We're putting meters on their personal wells. So, I mean.
No, not on their personal wells.
On
Those who use less than 2,000 acre-feet a year do not have meters on their wells. Cannot, by law. By Sigma says they cannot.
When I meant personal, I didn't mean just like a single I mean, someone who owns a property and it may be a large agricultural person or a user over a certain amount. We're still putting a meter on their well that wasn't done before. So we're affecting their property rights and how they're using it. So.
Well, and just for clarity, I'm not telling you that their use of the property would not be affected by the action. The point of the action is to affect the use of the property. But what I'm trying to make clear is we're not taking away a property right or denying somebody a property right or frankly telling somebody they can't pump. And there seems to be a perception that we're doing some kind of pumping moratorium, and that's not part of the GSP. That's the point I'm making.
But Lindsay, concurrently, if the trees out of the west end of the valley suck up all the water of the valley, that's going to affect your property rights because it's going to make your house worthless if you have no water.
Okay, is there any other comments on that? Okay, thank you.
I probably shouldn't bring this up, but I'm just confused on what Mr. Porter was saying, that he objected because you were quoting the President of the United States and he doesn't live here, so you didn't have a right to quote him?
He was confused at who was speaking. He didn't.
Oh. I didn't hear him apologize.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. So we are on item number 4. A resolution to approve a professional services agreement with Wildan Engineering in the amount of $51,918.16 for the preliminary engineering service for West Ward Avenue RSTP between North China Lake Boulevard and North Norma, and authorize the city manager Ron Strand to execute the agreement. Sir.
Yes, Honorable Mayor, City Council members, tonight's item is relative to proposed street resurfacing improvements to West Ward Avenue between North China Lake Boulevard and North Norma. What we're going to be asking you to do tonight is approve a professional services agreement with Willdan for the design, the environmental design and bidding assistance for that project. And we're also going to be asking the finance director to amend the budget to make whatever transfers necessary and to create a PO for the project, as well as asking you to authorize Ron to sign an agreement with the consultant, Willdan. A little background on this. Back in August 21st, you folks approved a resolution to allow us to apply for a grant, RSTP grant, for doing the resurfacing project. We were successful. The Public Works directors indicated to me that his conversation with Kern Cog is that the funds should be available to us to start our design, our environmental compliance and our design by this March. So as a result, we went out with requests for proposals for design services. We solicited our pre-approved consultant list, and we determined that Willdan was our most qualified consultant to take on the services. We are asking you to approve a professional services agreement with Willdan in the amount of $51,918.16. We're asking you to authorize the finance director to we're asking the finance director to amend the budget and to make any necessary transfers to create a purchase order in the amount of $52,349 using Measure V funding. And we're also asking you to authorize the city manager to execute the professional services agreement. If the council has any questions, I'm available for any question you may have.
I was curious how many proposals we had submitted that you all reviewed.
We have a pre-qualified selection of consultants. We currently have 4. Of those, only 2 of those are qualified to go after state and federal grants. They had the resources to be able to qualify for that level of or scope of work for us.
And so then those 2 both submitted proposals?
Yes, we received proposals from both. We evaluated them through a selection committee, and they were ranked, and Willdan was found to be the ranked highest and was the most considered the most qualified consultant. Okay. We're bound by the professions code to hire professional services based on qualifications and not on price. So when they submit their RFPs, they submit a sealed envelope as what they feel the project will cost. We determine the most qualified. We open up an envelope when we talk to them as the most qualified consultant, and then we begin negotiating the scope of work. And what we do is we negotiate what we feel, and also relative to a pre-approved or a pre-established budget, to what those services will be. So in this case, we've been successful in negotiating a contract that's less than what the amount that was authorized by the resolution for preliminary engineering.
Okay. Other comments from council? Any public comment?
Scott Miller, 341 East Wilson, Ridgecrest. What is this for?
We're going to resurface West Ward between North China Lake Boulevard and North Norma.
So didn't West Ward just get all the cracks in there just got sealed a couple, like last year or something like that? The big cracks. You guys put some putty or some. Not
Yeah,
putty,
we've had an ongoing wrestling match with the huge transverse cracking that occurs in
Right.
West Ward. It's deteriorated to a point where we have to do major crack filling, restoration of that surface, and then resurfacing the entire street.
So this is actually for resurfacing. That's the engineering project.
Yes, resurfacing. It also includes what we'll do to have to take care of the cracking such that we don't or try to minimize and retard the reflective cracking of the cracking that's already there.
So I lived in West Ward for 3.5 years. So I guess my question is, I think this up here says almost $52,000. This says about $53,000. Is there, once they resurface it, that's going to, I guess, fix the cracks that are in Ward now? And will this resurfacing prohibit the cracks from coming back? And if not, what's the warranty, or I don't like using the word guarantee, but what's the guarantee that those cracks aren't going to come back next year after we spend $52,000?
Well, this $52,000 is only for design services. It's for environmental and design services and preparing plans and specifications. So after that, we go after construction funding. I'll be asking the City Council to authorize us to proceed with construction funding.
So let's back up a second. So this $52,000 is just for engineering of that project.
Yes.
Okay. And then once we spend the $52,000 to have somebody go out and say we're going to put this much out. So will there be a warrant at 52? So once this is done, then we'll come back to council and ask for additional monies to resurface Ward.
Yes, we'll have plans and specifications, and quite honestly, our goal is to try to retard the effects of reflective cracking. We realize that those cracks out there are very significant and require some real engineering options to try to mitigate or to retard any reflective cracking. So that will be a primary task in engineering a solution for making sure that we retard those reflective cracks to the surface.
Will this have any impact on the resurfacing of the other streets in the area? That I don't know if that map's updated. I haven't looked at it in several weeks. The map Ron Schicky has, that won't impact
Mr.
that.
Miller, this is a grant. This is a grant from
I'm asking if it's going
government.
to impact the time frame of the rest of the streets being repaved.
No.
No, this is a completely independent project in which we'd be soliciting bids from contractors to perform the work. So
it'd be working.
This would not affect any of our other plans for street improvement projects.
Okay, thank you.
Do we have any idea what kind of resurfacing, or is that part of what they're going to research and recommend, like if we're going to mill it down? And
Yes, it'll be a mill and fill, but we've enjoyed some very good success with some of our recent paving projects. What we found is that we've kind of standardized upon it's called a high tensile fiber asphalt, in which carbon fibers are mixed with the asphalt, which gives the asphalt some tensile strength. It acts like mini rebars, if you want to make an analogy of rebars in the asphalt, to allow the asphalt to have some tensile strength. We've also employed the use of a geotextile interlayer, which tends to retard reflective cracking. So with those two combinations of high tensile asphalt as well as a geotextile interlayer, we're finding great success in retarding reflective cracking. We're also going to apply some methods, what we think might work for treating these cracks before we even start our project. We're thinking of milling out the crack, backfilling cleaning out the crack, backfilling with an asphalt, then applying yet another geotextile with a cap to match the existing surface, followed by milling the entire reach of West Ward, milling that down, applying a first layer of high tensile fiber asphalt, and then a geotextile and then the final cap with a high tensile fiber asphalt.
Are we going to do any boring so we don't have any surprises like we did with like PEG when we did those streets over there and we milled them and thought there was more of a base than what there actually was?
Yeah, we've got our, we intend to have geotechnical services as a part of this to find out what is existing there, to know what we have to work with.
Okay. Thank you.
Has other entities used this type of, to fill their cracks or prevent more cracking?
Yeah.
That's what I wanted, because this isn't something you just designed up. It's been done, and I wanted to make sure the public understood that.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, our desert environment is quite unique in how our asphalt responds to temperature change, traffic loading, and so forth. And we have this unique characteristics of these huge cavernous transverse cracks that appear. So we have a unique situation in the desert with temperature change and asphalt wanting to break into these large block segments. So we plan to attack that and come up with a solution.
Others?
So with those cracks, if they're coming up from the bottom, so from what I can gather, what you're describing is it acts almost like that new layer over the top acts like almost an elastomer kind of a surface to allow movement or expansion underneath, but not come through that. Kind of like I guess you'd use an elastomer on a crack foundation when you're putting tile down.
Yeah,
So-
not necessarily. It's more of a bridging, and what we're relying upon now is adding tensile strength to the asphalt on the surface,
Just to
as
hold
well
it.
as a geotextile to add an additional bond, as well as a bridge over those.
Right.
We call them thermal masses.
So just
is
to
the
hold
way-
it together
The
better,
actual
per se.
physics behind it we're looking at is differential and thermal masses where they want to separate. They want to move
Right.
independently, and therefore what we're trying to do is fix the gap and then bridge it using a tensile strength of asphalt as well as bridging using a geotextile.
Now, is it the tensile strength asphalt that performs better with our heat?
Yes, well, asphalt has no tensile strength. It's only held together by a chemical bond and some mechanical bonding by the aggregate interlock. Therefore, there's nothing else in there, no strands to help the bond between, if you want to break it down to even to the molecular level, there's nothing there to bond. So if you want to call them mini rebars, are there to
Right.
help bond or
Keep
create
the flow.
that tensile strength.
Yeah, and allow it not to flow so bad. Because isn't Ward one of those streets in town where you can see where the asphalt is really pushed out and moved and distorted near the
Well, I see
intersections?
that more on Upjohn at
On
the
Upjohn.
Norman
That may be the
intersection.
street I was
see
thinking of.
shoving.
Yeah.
It's called shoving.
Yeah, yeah.
Is what we see, and there's some on Norma right
Right.
at the intersection of Las Flores. That's kind of a different situation where acceleration, deceleration loads causes the asphalt to shear.
And I guess that's kind of what I was
shove.
leading toward was, would this technology inhibit some of that
Oh yes,
distortion of that?
most certainly, yes.
Yeah, because that's an issue. Anyone that's seen it in some of the streets in town, it's pretty
Yes.
impactful. So anyway, good.
We've
glad to hear
enjoyed
it.
good success with this strategy. An example is Bowman Road. When we resurfaced Bowman Road was an old county road with just desert mix and had no base whatsoever and severe cracking. And we went in with the high tensile asphalt with the geotextile, and we've enjoyed tremendous success with that, as well as some other projects around town. But I think we've kind of come across a solution to take care of some of the huge block cracking that occurs and taking care of retarding reflective cracking.
That's really good news.
Okay, any other council comments? No other public comments? Okay, motion?
I move approval of the requested action.
Second.
Please vote. 5 ayes, motion carries.
Okay, the next item. Item number 5, Approval of resolution regarding a recommendation by the Planning Commission to waive conditions on site plan review number 1908, a request to construct a new 9,600 square foot building to construct sidewalks and driveways ADA compliant. Heather?
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the council. So on January 28th, the Planning Commission heard site plan review 19-08 for the construction of a new building on a previously developed site. The site plan consists of a 9,600 square foot metal building and additional parking in an industrial zone. During the Planning Commission hearing, conditions were protested by the developer's representative. The Planning Commission found that in the previous portions of the development, the developer was not required to complete the improvements as it was required in this site plan. The Planning Commission recommended the removal of the conditions of approval relating to the construction of ADA compliant driveway and sidewalks. This is an aerial view of the site. The entire development consists of 2 parcels and 3 metal buildings are currently on the site. So this was for the addition of 1 metal building. This is the site plan. It shows the existing building and the new building and the shared driveway. The conditions of approval the Planning Commission recommended be removed by the City Council are A1, remove the existing driveway and replace with an ADA compliant commercial driveway approach, and A2, design and construct 5'5" wide sidewalk along the full frontage of the parcel for West Reeves. These images show the current site conditions. So you can see there is no sidewalk, there is landscaping and gravel, and that is the current driveway that is shared by the existing and the new building. Staff recommended conditions are required for accessibility compliance. The Americans with Disabilities Act and the California Building Code require at least 1 accessible route from public transportation stops, accessible parking spaces, passenger loading and drop-off zones, and public streets or sidewalks to an accessible entry. Accessibility is defined as the combination of various elements in the building or facility or site, which allows access and circulation for full use of the building. The ADA and the building code standards placed on this project are meant to provide equal access. For instance, if a person is dropped off at the public street or a bus stop, whether they're able-bodied or disabled, they should be able to access the building. Staff is going to recommend that City Council not waive the conditions. Lauren is here to answer any questions, and the property owner is also here, Mr. Tharp, so if you have questions, we can answer them.
I would like to ask a couple of questions. If this new building and the new design is approved according to the Planning Commission, and at some point in time the city is asked by whomever, why did you not demand ADA compliant walkways and roadways and conditions? That are we liable because we let that happen? That's probably a legal question as well as a planning, a construction question. Have you got all those answers now?
You're asking me to talk about hypothetical future liability of the city, which I would prefer not to do. If we have a because it provides a roadmap perhaps to claimants.
I understand, okay. If it provides a roadmap for compliance by these people, or lack thereof, of people who are going to build in the future, or continue to add and do, when you are required to do something and we choose to say, I'm sorry, we think you don't need to do it, but the law says you must, help me understand how.
Well, but when you're talking about, if you're asking me third-party liability for that decision,
Yes.
then you have to understand that public entity liability is a broader question. Remember, the basic rule of liability on the part of a public entity is sovereign immunity, and liability is the exception to that rule. So it becomes a question of statutory interpretation. Did we, and I will go down I can give you this analysis, but it boils down to, did we breach a mandatory duty under statute that would be necessary, that would be the claim that would have to be filed? And then if they were able to plead that correctly, the next issue that strikes me just off the top is that there's a pretty broad immunity that cities enjoy for the consequences of issuing permits. So, and it's also a legislative act, so you've got a separation of powers question. So what I'm getting at is,
You can't give us an answer.
right.
Thank you.
It would. So the answer is
that.
is there a risk? It depends. I'd like to think not. We have a bunch of tools in our toolbox to depending on how the claim is presented.
Boy, that wasn't an answer I would want to hear one way or another, no matter which side I believed. Okay, then help me understand, staff. The Planning Commission came back with a recommendation that was different from what was given to them. Help me understand their reasoning for that.
Would you like me to answer that?
Please.
There is no building in the industrial park that before there's ever required sidewalks. If you go up there in the industrial park, the only sidewalks that are up there are basically on unimproved properties that the cement plant poured when they had excess cement from going out on a job. They come back and they dump it and they did a little bit of sidewalk work. For example, on this street, on the south side, the only sidewalk on this whole long block is clear on the west end. So, and this is the fourth building of a 4-building project. Is that not correct? When was the last building built? It was about a year or so ago.
No, I think it was about 2 years ago.
2 years ago. And this requirement was not required on any of those 3 previous buildings. And that's why the Planning Commission came to this, because the industrial park was not designed to be a place where sidewalks, where pedestrians are walking, everything, because there's very few pedestrians out there. And that's why they came to this conclusion. Now, they did require, I think, a statement from the owner that in the event sidewalks required, they would put them in. Is that not correct?
That is true.
And that's not mentioned here. So if they put, first of all, there was talk about tearing the driveway out, which has been serving these other 4 buildings, and putting an ADA compliant, which means it has the signs on each side, the bumpy things on each side, and not requiring the sidewalks. Well, if you do that, then where are those things going? They're going to nothing. They're going to dirt. And so that's why they chose to do both. Leave the existing driveway there. And Kyle, you were there at the Planning Commission, so you might fill in anything I don't answer. So if we leave the existing driveway there and don't require the sidewalks, by changing that driveway to an ADA compliant driveway, because the only thing they're being used for right now is warehouse.
But it could be changed.
It could be changed. It could be changed down the road. That's true. Hypothetically, next month or next year, it could be changed. But in the meantime, they're not generating a lot of traffic there. And none of the projects on either side of that street that actually have development on them has sidewalks. And that's why they voted to do this.
Can I ask a quick question? So we know when it was built, but when was the site plan last reviewed?
It had 2 reviews. I don't have the dates for the initial one. It went to Planning Commission, and those conditions were not part of the approval. They did not require any sidewalks at that time, and it was a commission approved. But it probably was 6 or 7 years ago. I'm not sure. Perhaps the property owner would better know.
Dave, can you answer any of these questions? If you can, could you come up, please?
And then it received a staff level review. And again, those conditions were not part of the
When it received the
Introduce
staff
yourself,
level?
name and address for the
that was-
record, please.
David Tharp, 760 Gateway Street.
Okay.
We went to the council.
You have to lean close, sorry.
2006 is when we first started the project, and we did one each on the project that we're doing now. I also built Kim Parks across the street, and George Bertrand did it at the same time. So we did 4 projects, and we weren't required. We were required to do landscaping, which we did. No sidewalks. And we've gone with the last 3 buildings that we've done, and never we required the sidewalks.
Is the ADA requirement something new, Lauren?
Yeah.
Is it a new requirement to do this?
No, this is required actually through the building code. The building code very clearly requires that there be a path of travel requirement for new construction, and I've brought the
Did the
sections
building
from-
code change, I guess is what I'm getting at. Since their review in 2006, did the building code change?
It'd be hard for me to say that if there has been a change or not. I'm conscious of the building code and from about the 2013 version through the current 2019. And we have now we're now into the 2019 building code. And the code specifically requires accessibility from the street to the structure.
Okay.
Which is what the sidewalk, which is what the driveway provides. And the ADA compliance is all done on the property. Handicap parking and ADA compliant.
So what I saw in the
like
presentation, and maybe you guys, maybe I'm addressing the whole group here, is that there's a difference between needing access from the street and access to the building. Is that not correct? Can you do? And I know it was in the presentation somewhere. You mentioned it briefly and then sort of slid past the slide.
So in this picture, you can see on the site, you see the one parking space in the very front there. That is the accessible parking space. And as you can probably tell a little bit, it is raised significantly, and that allows access on the site. However, as the city, we have jurisdiction to allow from the street. So for the building permit, when it's inspected, they're going to make sure that there is an ADA compliant path of travel in the parking lot. But we are required to maintain from the street to the site.
You just used the word discretion. Discretion means to me that we have a choice. Is it a choice, or is it this is what it says we must do?
Well, the building code, if this went to plan check, the plan checkers would ask for the accessibility.
From the street and...
From the street, yes. The building code requires accessibility from the street to the structure. And if I may interject here, staff highly recommends that you take this subject very cautiously. There's 2 things that can happen here. You can establish a precedent by waiving these requirements, because these are required by ordinance, and you do have that authority to waive improvements by your powers as a city council, as having established those. But this will open the door for other developers to also ask for similar requests to waive those improvements, as well as you need to be conscious that the Department of Justice, through the Americans with Disabilities Act, mandates ADA compliance, and they have standards established, which the state of California has adopted, through their building code. So you not only have just the building code, but what's been mandated by the Department of Justice to comply to the Americans with Disabilities Act. So staff highly cautions you in your decision tonight.
That is exactly what I was going to say. I'm afraid that we don't need to set any more precedents in this town that we're waiving ADA compliance. And I hate to even direct that at you, Mr. Tharp, especially since I know it seems illogical to put a sidewalk in a place that is going directly to more desert.
Yeah, the sidewalk's going to go to nowhere. I don't see how putting a new sidewalk in front of this building is going to provide ADA access to the building. Because if they park out there, they're going to go up there. I'm sure they're going to wheelchair or walk or whatever up the driveway. Because you can't get a wheelchair up the curb on either end of the sidewalk to get in there. So they're not going to do that. So they're going to go up there. And then if you decided to waive the sidewalks and just require the driveway to be ADA compliant, then you're going to have those, I don't remember what they call those yellow bumpers.
Truncated donuts?
They're going to be there going to nowhere. And who handicated, having been handicapped the last few months, who's going to want to go out there and park and walk up the driveway and then walk down a sidewalk that ends 30 or 40 or 50 feet down the road? There's nowhere to go. You're going to have to turn around and go back, or you're going to have to try to bounce your walker or wheelchair over the curb onto the street.
Sure, I guess my point is, though, if that's always our answer, if our answer is always, well, why do it when it doesn't make sense, then that will be the answer for every other development. We'll never need to put a sidewalk in front of there. It's always going to get kicked.
This is in the industrial park. Any other commercial development, like I built 2 buildings on Ridgecrest Boulevard and a couple other buildings around town, and we put in the curb, gutter, and sidewalk and all that for those because they're in an area where people are you've got pedestrians. But up in the industrial park, you don't really have any pedestrians up there.
And I just built one. This last one was less than 2 years ago, and I didn't have to do it.
So I'd like to address that. So this project has been multifaceted since 2006.
2006.
And since 2006, we have not required this.
As long as I keep the same.
So, and is this the last?
This is the last
major segment of this
yes.
building out.
Yes.
So we have that. We have done it. It's been done since 2006. We've been making these decisions, and so I think I think Mr. Meyer touches on a lot of good points. You do yourself, and to change it at this point, it doesn't make any sense. If it was a brand new project, I agree with other council people here or members that maybe we'd look at it and say, okay, well, this is a new project. We're going to toe the rope here, but we haven't been toeing the rope, and I think it'd be sensible to finish it out and not require, if it was in an area where we had high density traffic, foot traffic, I'd say, yeah, that makes sense. It's not. It's in an industrial park. It's been done this way since 2006. I think that's not fair to Mr. Tharp and put that burden on him at this point in time.
And there will be handicap parking in front of the building.
Yeah,
there'll be
right.
two of them.
Madam Mayor?
So that's kind of how I look at it in the big picture and where I kind of stand on it. So,
Madam Mayor, I have some information I think might be helpful.
Please.
So the opportunity to waive the requirement has to be made on a finding of a determination of unreasonable hardship. The staff report didn't describe what that standard is, but I've got some additional information on that. The building code describes unreasonable hardship as existing when the cost of providing each of the access features to the area of alteration exceeds 20% of the project cost without these features. I don't know that you've got that information in front of you tonight to make that determination. Mr. Culp, was that ever provided? That
Yeah, I have that before me here, and what I've been able to ascertain from that is that only applies to existing buildings and facilities, not new construction.
That unreasonable hardship requirement?
That's correct. Yeah, it's under 11B-202, existing buildings and facilities, and it's under 11B-202.4, number 8, is where the hardship comes in, and that is for existing buildings where a developer wants to do some alterations or remodeling of the structure. Those ADA requirements are required, of course, but if the cost for those ADA improvements are excessive, then there's a hardship provision in which 20% is applied to determining the amount of ADA compliance is required for existing structures.
Now, one of the arguments I heard too was, well, he can change this to retail, but if he changes this to retail, he's going to probably have to put in some walls, some electrical, maybe some additional plumbing, and that's going to require a permit. And at that point, if he changes this to retail, where it's going to generate traffic, we could require the.
That's when you go back in for TIs.
Yeah.
You have to go and get a permit for that, and it'll change everything.
Isn't that correct?
Yes, permits are required for tenant improvements.
If it's above 50% of the valuation of the project.
That's exactly right.
We
have a limit on when.
And if there's any plumbing or
schedule.
electrical, that has to be inspected.
Well, they've already had the plumbing and the concrete. Is that not correct, Mr. Tharp?
Yes.
You asked for a compensation, I believe Mr. Bell did, 2 years ago to allow the plumbing to be put into the concrete. So if and when it ever was upgraded to an office building, you wouldn't have to cut the concrete and bear that cost. So the city allowed you to put that in.
Yes.
So really at this point in time, you're never going to reach that 50% threshold to be able to ever come back to the city for anything, correct?
No, correct.
Well,
Explain what
according to the building code, if I replace my water heater, I have to come and get a permit.
Yeah.
So how could he put in walls and electrical without having to come and get a permit?
I guess I misunderstood.
He has to have a tenant improvement permit.
Yes.
The problem is tenant improvements, the amount of the cost for those improvements doesn't exceed 50% of what the assessor's office says is the valuation of the structure. That's the only thing that kicks in off-site improvements of putting in curbs, gutters, and sidewalks.
So the off-site improvements, even if we have this agreement from him saying that he would put those in when it's required, we couldn't kick that in. So basically, the agreement with him is worthless, is what you're saying.
Correct.
Unless we require a bond.
The tools that you have in your toolbox right now through the municipal code is the improvements can be a deferred lien agreement, cash can be provided, some form of improvement security, a bond. Those can be provided in lieu of constructing the improvements. We offered a deferred lien agreement, and the owner did not want to have something placed upon his title.
I was going to say that puts a mark on their property, though, if they do that.
Yes.
Right. Yeah, they'll never have to come back to Planning Commission if their costs don't exceed 50%. Yes, they would be required to come get an over-the-counter permit for any electrical improvements, plumbing improvements, but it would never come back to Planning Commission for entitlements and review for off-site improvements.
Who has not done that? We have. We just finished Northrop Grumman with tenant improvements.
Was the value more than 50%?
Yes.
The improvement value, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, Northrop Grumman, ATK, all those are right in my properties. The projects.
Let me, to do it, first of all, we've set the precedence all along to not require this. But second of all, let's look at the project that's being, and I'm not trying to get anybody in trouble or anything, project's being done on Ridgecrest Boulevard, the old Quonset hut. Are they having to bring that whole street up to ADA compliance?
When we did the improvements along the frontage of that Quonset hut, and those curbs, gutters, and sidewalks and drive approaches right now comply to the current ADA requirements.
You sure?
I'm positive.
I thought that was what the whole West Ridgecrest Boulevard ADA compliant project was for.
Oh no, you see, the Quonset hut did not have curbs, gutters, and sidewalks, and so we designed the new curbs, gutters, and sidewalks for the widening to comply to the current ADA requirements. So
It's the south
everything
side.
there.
I think you're thinking of
the-
the south side is the one with.
I'm thinking of the north side.
No, I'm saying the south side is the one with some of the steep driveways.
Yeah, those are ADA compliant. Those have truncated domes and meet the required slopes. Everything
No,
along that.
there was a
everything
couple.
along the,
No, there's a couple on the south side that the grade was
well,
going
the
to
south side, there was existing curbs and gutters there. Anything that was new curbs, gutters, and sidewalks complied to the ADA requirements.
Yeah, you're thinking of the ones that they just left there that were already there.
Yeah, I didn't realize I did not realize that did not have curb, gutter, and sidewalks when they went in and did that, when they did the Ridgecrest
Yeah.
Boulevard project. But so I know those improvements are exceeding 50%. Plus, it's taken them forever.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's dangerous for us to keep on with the precedents of waiving the ADA compliance. I think just because we've done it in the past doesn't mean we should keep doing it.
I think it's ridiculous to put a sidewalk in that goes to nowhere, but that's.
I think none of us would think it was ridiculous if we parked our van there and got out of a wheelchair. I don't mean that at you personally. I mean, I drove by the property and I parked there and I drove back and forth looking at it. I was thinking the exact same thing you are. Seems illogical to put a piece of concrete there. Until I thought about, well, what if you pull up in a van and you let your ramp out to put your, that would be important to you.
But you're gonna ride your wheelchair or whatever up the driveway. You're not gonna go on the sidewalks.
But why would you not want to start somewhere? Why would we want to keep kicking the can down the road and down the road and down the road?
Why would you park on the street anyway? Why wouldn't you park in the handicap parking?
Because the law says we have to have.
That we built them for. That's what we're supposed to do.
I'm not really sure why we're trying to waive it. I really don't. I don't understand
Well,
it.
it passed the planning commission 4-0.
I don't think it should have.
Well, do we have different rules every time? I mean, I've built a lot of buildings in town here.
Well, just because things have been waived doesn't make it a rule.
Well,
I
yeah,
think,
but I have a building right in back of Mom's Furniture that I just built, and they had me put bigger sidewalks in.
Sure.
Why? No one else in town has them.
They should.
I think,
What's the rules?
the building codes change over time, just like with
Well, I've
people
got 6-foot
constructing.
sidewalks, and the rest of them are 4 foot. So
But the
what's the?
construction and building codes are changing, like for homes being built now, they're required to put solar in, and that's just how things progress over time, and that's how the state chooses to
I understand. But they
adopt.
asked me to put landscaping in it. Now I have to tear it out. There's
You gotta
also
tear all this landscaping out to put the
there's
sign.
hydrants, and there's a lot of utilities in that. If you've looked at it, the project.
What if we look at a compromise? We require the driveway to be brought up to ADA compliance, but don't require the sidewalks to be put in.
Does that meet our conditions of requirements from the street?
I'm not sure about the legal requirements, but it sounds like that's a change we would have to send back to the planning commission, correct?
No, they sent this up to us, and we have to make the final decision.
That
Yeah,
we're
right.
I thought
We're the final decision.
Yeah.
The planning commission could not waive the requirement because they're by ordinance. And so they made the recommendation to city council to waive it. So it
Well, but
would
I'm
be
talking
up to
about
the
this-
council then to decide whether they want to waive the requirements or not.
Well, they're talking about making a new requirement.
No, we'd be waiving one requirement that the planning commission recommended, but not waiving the other.
Oh, I see, okay, never mind.
So it'd be requiring the one that they waived, but not requiring the second one that they waived, of putting in the sidewalk going both ways to nothing. And then, we required him to put in landscaping, now we're telling him to tear all the landscaping out and put in sidewalks.
Oh, I don't like it. There's nothing about me that likes asking for something like that. It's unpleasant, but we can't keep up with this precedence of continuing to waive ADA compliance, especially when we.
Well,
correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, like penny
if we-
pool.
If we require the approach to be brought up to ADA compliance, then we're not waiving ADA compliance, we're just waiving the sidewalks that go to nowhere.
But let me ask a question here. On this next piece of property, the person, do you own the property next to that, Dave?
We're the 2 metal buildings.
I'm not sure where your property line ends on this.
No, that's Ladd's property. Mine's to the right, the two buildings.
She,
This is the piece you're referring to.
no, he owns the buildings.
He owns these, but
Yeah.
I wonder, the reason you're saying sidewalks going to nowhere, when the next person builds, the sidewalk won't go to nowhere. They'll have to construct
Right, it's already
as
there.
up to the current ADA standards now. Is that correct?
Yes.
Do you own all of this?
No,
Or
not
this?
just those two right.
Those right there.
Uh-huh.
You don't own this?
No.
This is already built. It has no sidewalk. So if they put a sidewalk in from the driveway to here, it is going to nowhere, and it's never going to go to anywhere because the property's already developed next door.
But she's talking
About here.
this property.
Yeah, I'm in questioning whether the sidewalk would still go to nowhere.
Until
Because-
something's developed there.
Till something's
you don't know
developed,
when
would
they-
it have, well, but would it have to have sidewalk, I know I'm just talking with the microphone, would it have to have sidewalk and parking and all the ADA requirements?
That's probably
In that
not
new
to
property?
code. That's probably not to code because he just put, he was the concrete guy, so he just put some of his scrap concrete in there, so it's not.
But that's further down.
That's
not
further
next door.
down, yeah.
That's way
Okay.
further down.
Yeah,
That's why I say the concrete people have been putting sidewalk. The only sidewalks in the industrial park right now are really on vacant property that the concrete company owns, and it's he's not mixing up a batch of concrete and making sidewalks. He's going out on like my job and dumping, and when he gets nothing on mine, he's got some left over in the truck, so he takes it back and he does a section of sidewalk, and that's how the sidewalks there has gotten there.
and so they're not ADA compliant by any means.
Probably not.
No.
Yeah,
But it's mostly on undeveloped property. So
Honorable
okay,
Mayor,
what's, please,
there is one other consideration, and that would be there is a potential, it's reasonable to assume that someday in the future that there will be a need for sidewalks in the area. And as the area develops and as it builds out, this could be years, could be who knows how long, but there is the potential that the city could have some physical impact of having to put those improvements in if we don't have the developer do it as a part of his development.
that's kind of what I was asking Keith, is if we don't require what's required and we waive it, it's our responsibility in the future, rather than having the developer do it, we would have to do it.
There
And
would be
that's
a-
kind of what I
a
was asking
potential
Keith.
future physical impact, and that would be a reasonable assumption.
now, years ago, when I was on the council before, we approved a lot of churches in town, and we did not require them to put the sidewalks in because it was a burden to them financially. But we got a waiver of protest. Is that not a tool anymore? In other words, they signed a waiver of protest that if we ever decided to put the sidewalks in, they would not protest it, and they'd go ahead and pay for their sidewalks.
Yeah, I'm not.
I'm going back to your dad's.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that, to be honest with you. But Madam Mayor, I misunderstood your question earlier. The properties, the area that is our property that we have to maintain, that is our responsibility for ADA compliance. So, yeah, potentially, if that's, I don't know. Again, I don't want to comment on whether that specifically could create liability in this case, but that is to the extent it's our property, and if it's required to be done, someone's going to have to pay for it.
Okay. Where are we with this, council? Does anybody have more questions for Dave? For Mr. Tharp, sorry. I've known you too long ago. Sorry. Does anybody have any questions?
Mike just made a statement. What was the about doing it down the road? Was that it?
I think the
about
planning
churches?
commission approved the waiver with you signing an agreement that you would do it down the road if it was required.
Oh, okay. As long as the other businesses did it also.
Well, if it was required,
Yeah.
But what
Would
was said is basically there would be nothing to trigger to force that. And so
Yes, agreements and affidavits are not anything that would ride with the land or travel with the land. The only thing that would travel with the land would be some lien that would guarantee that the owner would be responsible for those improvements whenever that lien would be called due. That's the only thing that travels with the land.
Do you have anything you'd like to say? Or ask, or?
Well, I did basically the same thing on Gateway. I built a metal building on Gateway, didn't have to put any curb gutter sidewalks.
How long ago did you do that?
Been about 5 years.
And when were the building codes updated, you said?
Well, the code goes through cycles every 3 years.
Okay.
And
But when it comes to ADA, it's not like, that can go back quite a ways, can it? Just because
1991 was the Americans with Disabilities Act.
Right.
What year?
So
1991.
Thank you.
So the liability for such a thing goes back quite a ways. It doesn't matter if building codes have changed here and there. It doesn't matter if the city's waived it or have not waived it. It's still an issue. I'm just to speak plainly.
And we were audited by the FHWA. A complaint was lodged after we did the Ridgecrest Boulevard project, and an ADA specialist, technician, came out to satisfy the claim and do an investigation in which we had to supply evidence that we had done our self-evaluation and that we had a transition plan. Unfortunately, we did have a pilot transition plan established, and we did have an evaluation, so we were able to meet those two requirements. With that, he evaluated the improvements that we did install, and there was no issues brought forth.
But if someone
there was one issue that he did want to have parallel parking ADA parking space. Every 6 spaces requires for parallel parking some ADA compliant parallel parking slot. But as far as our improvements, we were in compliance.
So, but what you're saying then is that someone potentially could lodge a complaint against this section.
Well, most certainly. There's been established Google claims. People will look at Google and target businesses for noncompliance and file suits. And now I think they're trying to pass legislation where that doesn't happen, where they can repetitively file claims just from a Google research of noncompliance. But it's real.
So is any of this section of street in compliance right now?
Well, I can tell you that the driveway is not, and that there is no accessible path of travel from the street to the structure.
I guess what I'm referring to is that entire section of street, those.
No, none of them have been required before.
This entire section.
I would, without the benefit of really doing some more investigation on that, I'd be hesitant to.
So I think we're putting a burden. I think we're putting a burden on Mr. Tharp by requiring this at this stage in the game when he's almost finished with the project. It's been going on since 2006. We've allowed it this long. The other properties, none of this looks. I'm just going off by this picture, but none of it looks like it's ADA compliant. If down the road we had to put in ADA compliant sidewalks, and all we did was require him to put in that little section where he's required to put it in now. I mean, that's not that big of a, portion of the job that's being completed at this point in time. And I'm going back to the same thing I keep going back to, and that is, since 2006, he's done this project. It's the last phase of it, and to put the burden onto him right now, I think if we want to, at this point as a council, after you get done with a project like this, say, okay, that's it. It's not okay what we've been doing. We weren't part of that in 2006, and say that we're going to require all new projects to meet that standard. I'm okay with that. and keep consistency. I like to see consistency. But this isn't consistency on where we've been and with Mr. Tharp. So
I guess I'm a little confused at the site plan. The project was a total of 4 buildings? How many
Yes.
buildings?
But we've done them, it's like we've done a half at a time, so there's like 6 of them. And we've added on to them.
Okay,
See,
where's the new building going?
See, there's one of
Is
them.
it going on the east side of the property where it's, I guess, dirt right now? Is that where it's going?
There's actually one building that's missing right in between the two.
Well, that's why I say, we're talking about the
Yeah.
4th building.
There's a building there right now,
Okay.
so they don't have the right.
And you don't
picture.
have curb gutter and sidewalks there?
No, and then
And
that's
so
the new
then
building,
the other
new
building is
project.
going over here.
Exactly.
So we can only require the curb gutter and sidewalk on that parcel.
Just right
So
here.
in answer to your question, Peggy, is it is going to go to nothing because the other piece is already developed. We can't require him to put sidewalk there because we didn't require it before. So we're talking about
Just half of just the one parcel.
sidewalk from here to here, and both sides are already developed. So we have no way of enforcing the other sidewalks to go in. So in perpetuity, both sidewalks are going to go to nowhere. There's no way to ever extend those sidewalks unless we do an improvement project, right?
What if,
We've already set a precedence. That's what I hate to sound like I'm just repeating myself, but we've set this precedence, like you just said, Doc. We've set this precedence. It's dangerous. It's a dangerous precedence and a liability to the city that we've set. And if we're going to be consistent, we should be consistent with the rules, the law.
Well, that's why I think the compromise of just requiring the ADA compliant drive approach to be done and not worry about the sidewalk on the rest of the property, because it's never going to go anywhere.
what if we say if we have some sort of, is this something trying to cover everybody's backside, that if at some point in time, if a suit is filed, they must have to put it in at their cost?
That's what he had agreed to, but what Lauren is saying is unless you put that as a lien on the property,
It's not enforceable.
it's not enforceable.
Can we put it on the property?
A lien on the property, I don't think.
A lien on the property clouds the title.
Yeah.
And if you require a bond for the amount of the sidewalk, you might as well spend the money on the
And do
sidewalk
it.
rather than the bond.
Well, if you were going to work that out as a condition of waiving it, then I'd like to have the opportunity to make sure that that's, to the extent that it can be done, it's done correctly, and I don't have the answers for that off the top of my head.
So you're asking us to not make a decision tonight to do that?
Well, no, what I'm saying is, if the city council is inclined to waive it and would like to have that as a condition of the waiver, then I would ask for the opportunity to work out that agreement with the applicant and to make sure that it's done lawfully. I'm not suggesting any particular course of action tonight.
So, Lauren and Heather, would you recommend that compromise?
The municipal code, as long as the municipal code is satisfied, staff is fine, as long as there's a commitment to, or something binding to ensure that those improvements will be installed. No matter what the form is, as long as it's a binding agreement
So
that would travel with the land. It's met the letter of the law as far as your ordinance.
But what's being discussed, Lauren, is not requiring the sidewalk, but requiring the driveway approach, and that's what he's asking.
Right. Would that meet the access from the street requirement for ADA?
Well, the landing, let's say a van with an applicant or with a person with a disability were to put down the ramp, they'd be putting it in the middle of a driveway approach. I mean, it could be done, yes, but you're doing it on a driveway versus on the sidewalk.
Where would you put the access? On the sidewalk?
Yes, the sidewalk would be considered as because the code also says from the sidewalk, not only from the street, but the sidewalk.
You can't get a wheelchair up the curb onto the sidewalk.
No.
Uh,
The vans
I'm
come
talking about,
down, they
van-
have the
vans that have
platform
the
that comes
platform.
down and lands on the curb, and then they wheel
Some of
off.
them come down the back. Some vans I've seen, the ramp comes down the back. That's not going to get up the curb.
It depends on if it's the person operating the motor vehicle. If it's the person operating the motor vehicle, most of the time they come out the side because they can't get
even our-
to the back.
I just
of
don't
it.
think we should
Even
make
our
a whole lot of
bus.
speculation on how that
If
works.
someone were to ride our public bus, the ramp would come down on the sidewalk.
Right.
So what's the pleasure of the council?
So I'm going to recommend that we do not waive the ADA.
With no compromise?
We've heard from staff over and over and over again. I think that it's pretty cut and dry.
Are you making a recommendation or are you making a motion?
She asked me, she goes, what
What's
do
the-
we,
what's the
she's saying, what do we
pleasure?
think? I'm not making a motion.
Yeah, so I guess are you gonna make the motion?
Sure, yeah, I move that we do not waive the ADA.
So that is a motion.
I make a motion.
Which is the resolution that's in the packet.
I will second that.
IT, can you go to the approval? Thank you. Please vote.
Wow.
Wait. So this
Can-
says,
that's
this
why-
says, this is written, it says approval
Oh, the
to waive the conditions.
Regarding a recommendation by the planning commission, but Heather?
What, are we confused here?
Nope. Here's your
Because he made a motion and she seconded it.
Yes.
Right, I
making
just
sure
want
it's
to clarify
because of
that
the wording.
this slide, make sure that we're clear.
And it was, you're moving the staff recommendation, and the staff recommendation is contained in the resolution.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
So the resolution is to affirm the conditions that staff placed.
Let me, can I ask a question here before I make my vote? If this is not approved, can we come back with a compromise? Can I ask that?
This doesn't stop another motion from coming forward if this motion is not granted, is not approved.
Okay, wait a minute. I gotta look here. I can't remember what my numbers are. One is yes.
2 is no,
Two.
3 is abstain.
We have 3 noes and 2 yeses with Ms. Stevens and Mr. Blades. The motion does not carry.
Okay, will somebody come back with the ability to make a compromise here?
Well,
You
you
want a different
can,
motion?
I want a different motion.
you can make a motion.
Well, I'm trying to figure out what the compromise is, because I want to cover the back side of the city.
But
I want to make sure that we don't set a precedent that we can't live with.
the only way to cover the backside of the city is to follow the staff recommendation.
Well, now, that isn't what Keith said.
That's what Lauren explained it. That not only the law also includes access from the sidewalk, not just the street at the driveway.
Well, I think a question was asked as whether we could, by agreement,
A bond?
Sort of assign responsibility to the owner in the event that there's subsequent legal action, I think is what the proposal was.
Would you be willing to do that?
But that's essentially a negotiation.
A negotiation.
With us and the owner, because I'm not sure exactly what we would require to make sure that, as you put it, the city's butt is covered.
Yeah.
And I would want to talk to my land use people about that. So if a majority of the city council wants to try to work out something with that as part of it, then I would request that rather than approve it tonight, you direct staff, specifically our offices, to reach out to the applicant and staff and make sure that we can craft something that covers the city correctly.
In concept, Mr. Tharp, do you agree with that?
Yes. Well, we've got one on file for the Gateway project. I built 2 buildings out there, and I did that on the first one because they didn't know where and Lauren should know. We went to the city and signed something to cover it, and I'd pay for it down the road if they figured out where the line was or where I could put curb gutter and sidewalks. They didn't even know. So.
And that would include bonding it.
Right. I don't have a problem with it.
Does that cover your concerns about setting a precedent?
Well, because I was confused because Lauren said earlier there wasn't a way to force that to be done.
Yeah, agreements and affidavits are something that just doesn't travel with the land. So you need something that ensures that whoever future owner might be has that encumbrance and knows that requirements are going to be made or improvements are going to be made at the request of the city.
Yeah, that's correct. What I would ask you to give me the opportunity to do is to make sure that we put the proper legal instruments in place so that
If the property is sold.
Right,
Okay.
in order to account for these contingencies. So I guess what I'm suggesting is if this is the direction of the staff, that rather than resolve this item tonight, that we resolve it on a subsequent agenda after we've had the opportunity to come back with something.
What I would like to make sure that I understand, that if when we come back with this, that both Kyle and Lindsay, your concerns have been addressed with that, because I don't want another precedent. We've got way too many of these in the city. I abhor these. I think they're horrible to try to administer. They're difficult for the property owner to understand, and it makes it even more difficult on our staff, and I don't want to do that. I just want to make sure that we've covered, again, we've done what's right. We haven't established a precedent that the next person can come and say, oh, but you did it for him. I do not want that. And that's my issue. So if we can't come up with something legal that you all can agree on, I'm going to say, as of now, I would vote yes on this item. So, and it's not a threat, not a promise, but we've got to come up with that.
So I guess what we want you to do
is do the impossible.
Work with the property owner and see if you can come to an agreement.
Got it. I'm optimistic.
And then just put this on the next council meeting, is that right? Could we do it by the next council meeting?
Yeah, I think so.
I don't want to hold them up.
We would be holding up your permit to start.
How long is that going to take? I mean, I've been on this for months now.
2 weeks is the next city council meeting.
Staff reports and everything's due Monday. Can you have it?
Oh, is
done
that
by
right?
Monday? Yes, sir.
What
It's
did I
quick
just agree to?
turnaround when we have meetings every 2 weeks.
Yeah, Lauren, what was it that we did on Gateway? Wasn't there did we just have just a lien that was placed on the property in case it was ever required in the future?
I know that we did not know what the ultimate street improvements were going to be at that location due to its proximity to the Bowman Channel. We know that when Bowman Channel gets built, the road will be elevated to some extent and would affect his adjoining improvements. So we knew that we couldn't enforce or have him do his improvements at that time with the unknown of what the Bowman Channel would do adjoining the channel.
And what was the instrument that he signed at the time?
I'm trying to think if it was a lien agreement or what we had required him to sign. I'm thinking it was a lien agreement.
Yeah, I just wouldn't be comfortable recommending this until my land use people had a chance to take a look at it and come back with something. And it would be appropriate, in my mind, to have that agreement as part of this package that's then brought back to you for review.
So can you do that by Monday?
No, I can't do it by Monday.
Well,
I won't be back in my office
you
until
waited
Friday.
months, waiting two more weeks. I'm sorry, but this is the only way we can accommodate this.
If we put it on the agenda for next meeting, we don't have to have everything by Monday, do we? Several times before we haven't had it.
Yeah, can he post the attachments later? We posted the attachments like a week later, like the agreement.
May I, Honorable Mayor?
Sure.
Mr. Tharp can proceed with his with the issuance or submittal of his plans. There's nothing to stop him from that. It's the finaling of his project that would hold up anything final on the project that he hasn't taken care of his street improvement requirements. So there's nothing to hold him up.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we can place it on the March 18th agenda to allow more time for the attorney?
Amen.
Okay.
Thank you.
I will put it on the March 18th agenda.
Okay. Thank you, David. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we beat this one to death. Okay, committee reports. Finance Committee, Scott, meeting tomorrow? Yeah, we're meeting tomorrow.
Correct.
Okay. Infrastructure,
Next Thursday, week from tomorrow.
Economic Development.
We met. We had Mr. Janik there from the China Lake Alliance giving information on basically the things you talked about next week, the Industry Day and the Economic Outlook Conference. We also briefly discussed Buxton. I think next time we're going to have that up so that we can look at it, and the website, and the electronic billboard. There was some discussion on the electronic billboard committee updates. So, and she had something else she wants to add. Did you have anything else you wanted to add? Oh, okay, great. Parks and Recreation did not meet, but hopefully you all are supposed to, we were supposed to have the bicycle, the skate park, adding bicycles to a draft.
Oh, is this a deliverable that you owe you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
For Monday.
Okay. I'll remind Lloyd.
Thank you.
Okay, now RACVB.
Madam Mayor, members of the council and the public, for the RACVB, we had a committee meeting this morning. We approved the budget, and then we had a travel show update. The travel show that they went to had about 25,000 people. This year, there was a lot more interest in Ridgecrest and the area in general, and there was a lot of commitment to coming to Ridgecrest as a destination or vacation. And there was lots of recognition within the name, being in the news and things like that. So that was recognized not only at our local RACVB, but at the county level. People were asking about Ridgecrest, and so that's generating a lot of interest. We have a welcome center update as well. So we have secured a location; it's solidified. They have also attended the California Welcome Center Outlook Conference, and they were able to get tips on how to properly start that, how to continue to do the right measures and make sure that they're compliant with that organization. Again, there's only 13, not including ours, in all of California, and they do global advertising for all of the California centers. And in the Death Valley, we are the only California Welcome Center that will be here in a large span within California. In Central California, we would be the only one. Caltrans has also agreed to put up about 7 or 8 signs regarding the Welcome Center, so that will be very well advertised in this area. And then the grand opening is at the beginning of July. To address another issue, the electric boxes around town on corners are being refreshed and they're being updated. So in case anybody had concerns as to why there were not any doors on there, that is just an update. Another thing that the RACVB discussed is that they will be coming out with a newsletter, just to come out with kind of letting the public know exactly what they're able to do and how to address certain issues that that the public might have. We also have a great film report this month. We had one music video filmed in January and 2 Super Bowl commercials. We have a revenue that was generated about $376,000 compared to $70,000 last year. This in January. And then lastly, we have the Sports Commission update, and they have commitments from DP4 Racing, which is off-road racing. They're adding a race, so that will total 3 within the year. And we also have been added to the circuit for SoCal Motocross, and so they will also be coming to the Ridgecrest area. And that is my update for the council and the public. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Very good.
Thank you. Okay, next item, other
sorry.
committees, boards, or commissions?
I forgot to mention that I also have distributed California Welcome Center flyers for everybody. They're also welcome to the public, and if anybody else has any questions, they're welcome to visit the RACVB. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you want ours to put out there for the public in case they want any? You got enough? Okay. All right. Okay, other committees, boards, and commissions. Anybody have any?
I'm going to Kerncog tomorrow.
Okay.
Get to go to Bakersfield again.
You won't have to sit for so long.
Stand.
Yeah. Stand.
Hey, he was able to put his foot up in my car.
Okay.
Said you're able to put your foot up in my car. You're able to elevate a little bit.
Yeah. That back seat is a little bit crowded.
Oh, you rode it. Oh,
Yeah.
I've ridden there.
So my knee's not very happy tonight.
Okay.
I found a chair, though. At least I was able to sit down for the 2.5 hours. We went to listen to Trump today, so that's why we were late getting here. Because he was an hour late getting there.
And I got the Desert League of California Studies at the end of the month in Victorville.
Okay. You'll let us know how great that was?
Yes, ma'am.
Good. Okay, any others? Future agenda items? Oh, wait a minute, city managers, thank you.
Yes, Madam Mayor, I got a couple items. One was in response to Mark McCoy's public comment. I know we're trying to stay disciplined on responding to public comment, and I usually try to reserve the city manager's time to respond so we don't have a back and forth, and unfortunately Mr. McCoy's not here. But to kind of talk a little bit about his issue, last budget cycle, City Council did approve the purchase of curtains for the event center. It is for more events like weddings. It's for the city rents that Kerr-McGee Center out numerous times a year. We offer that service as a benefit for those who may want to rent the facility, make the place look a little bit better. I don't know if we should just not do anything because we have one vendor in town that does it. I don't think we're taking business away. I think they have the opportunity to rent the facility and run whatever events they need. We are aware that we do need to update our video and audio visual displays. We are in the process of doing that. We should be coming back to you again this year during the budget process to upgrade some of these features that we can have for businesses or folks that want to rent the facility. So it's not like we want to be in direct competition with local business. That is our facility that we rent. Now, we can't rent that out to those folks to run their events. That's up to them to advertise. But if somebody comes to the city and wants to run a wedding and not hire this specific group, they should be free to do so.
And for the video equipment and for the curtains, those won't be free of charge.
No, we are. There's a cost to rent everything on that. So, and that was discussed during the council presentation. So I do feel for Mr. McCoy. I don't think the city's in competition. The city has a center that we rent out to the public, and we don't have a contract with them to run our events. So we need to provide whatever we can to make sure that what we have is quality, and we're doing what we can as staff to make sure that each year we're trying to do something to improve our facility. So I don't think we should hold up or not do something because we have one business in town that may be in competition.
Or any businesses.
Correct.
I mean, we want to direct to our facility.
And we have had complaints from other folks that have rented our facilities that, we can improve. And the curtains last year was a step towards that improvement. We have improved our sound system. I do believe, this is part, we are aware of that our video equipment can be better. It needs to be replaced periodically, and it is available for rent. But, it does come with the cost of our IT staff too. So, we are doing what we can to make sure that the facilities that we have are in good condition, so those that want to rent it without having to go through a third party can rent it and have options.
Thank
And
you.
it also has a potential of putting a little bit of revenue into our city budget.
Correct.
Yep.
Yeah, correct.
So it's a step in the right direction instead of a constant negative deficit and losing money, and, we're stepping in the right direction of gaining a possibility of gaining a little bit back and working. So
Right. Our facility turned 30 years old in December, and we've done very little maintenance on this facility. And you're going to see the staff's going to be bringing stuff. We have the HVAC project, which starts March 2nd, where they're going to start replacing 19 over 24 HVAC. So you're going to start seeing staff as money becomes available. As we can do this, we are going to start refurbishing this facility, because if we don't start taking care of this, the price tag down the road is going to be astronomical. So,
But if I was to rent the facility, I could either rent my stuff from here or from him. That'd be my choice.
correct. If I'm doing a wedding and I don't want to hire him to be my DJ, I want to have my cousin bring his sound system, and I want to have curtains to change the look. We have curtains for them to rent. I don't think we're in direct competition with anybody. We have a facility, and we want to provide options or a menu, and I have no problems if there's 3 or 4 people that are in business listed on our wall saying these folks provide this sort of service within our community. I don't have a problem with that. I mean, I think we encourage that entrepreneurship. But for the city just to not, I mean, it was kind of contradictory. One, it was your video is not adequate, but you have curtains. So.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, future agenda items.
I'm sorry, one thing. I apologize. Industry Day, next Tuesday, 8:30 to 4. The city is participating in that event. That is San Diego Navy, NAFAC coming up to present the potential contracts that are going to be coming out. The RFPs, requests for proposals, are going to be coming out to their government contractors for review. The Navy is going to be making a presentation on those contracts. The city is going to be participating in the aspect of we're going to be identifying local amenities within town that the contractors could then be aware of when they're building their contracts. Melissa has been, I know she's been working a lot of time on this presentation. Just one example would be is we reached out to our local restaurants because we know there's going to be a need for catering. And so we reached out to one local business, and they reached out to 3 other restaurants, and they formed a group. And they're going to be at that meeting and be prepared to make a presentation to say that they can cater up to 1,500 people using their 4 businesses. We've also reached out to the Ridgecrest Visitors Bureau about our hotel rooms to make sure that our hotels are going to be there to offer up, what hotel rooms may be available, what our historical occupancy is during those times, as well as of our local real estate board. They're going to be there about what properties may be available. So Melissa's been working extremely hard with Dave Janik from China Lake Alliance and IWEDC for the city to present and have available points of contact, several different areas. I mean, like we're going to have a Home Depot there available to be able to answer questions to the contractors about supplies they may be able to provide. So we've reached out to several businesses. So I spoke to their small businesses rep down in San Diego on Tuesday, and as of that day, they had well over 300 people that RSVP'd. Our capacity in the room is 400, and they're thinking that they may fill that room with 400 people. They said that they've had 2 similar events in San Diego and gotten nowhere near the number of interested parties. So it should be a pretty big event on Tuesday.
Thank you. Okay. Future agenda items.
Yeah.
Oh, did you? I thought.
She said she got it. The bicycle.
Okay. All right. Mayor and council comments. Anybody? Okay,
I'm ready to go home.
we're going to adjourn. Thank you all for coming, and thank you all for staying. We appreciate it.
You know, Ron Porter's comment, we're not serving.